The rain fell like shards of broken glass against the hospital windows. Each drop seemed to echo the pounding of my heart as I stood in the sterile corridor, watching through the small rectangular window as my mother's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. The ventilator breathed for her. The monitors beeped their rhythmic countdown. And I stood there, completely powerless. "Mr. Sullivan?" The doctor's voice cut through my thoughts like a scalpel. Dr. Chen was a good man. I could see it in his tired eyes, in the way his shoulders sagged with the weight of delivering bad news day after day. "I'm afraid we need to discuss your mother's treatment options." Treatment options. Such clinical words for what really meant. How much is a life worth? How do you put a price tag on the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything so you could have a better life? The experimental treatment we discussed, Dr. Chen continued, his voice soft, almost apologetic. It's her only chance, but without insurance coverage, the cost would be approximately $300,000. And your sister's condition. He didn't need to finish. Emma was in the pediatric wing, her small body ravaged by the same genetic disease that was killing our mother. 7 years old, and she'd already seen more hospital rooms than playgrounds. The medication keeping her stable cost $5,000 a month. Without it, she had maybe 3 weeks. I was 26 years old, working 2 jobs that barely covered rent and groceries. I had $1,200 in my bank account and a maxed-out credit card. I might as well have been asked to fly to the moon. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Your mother?" "Days, maybe a week." "Emma, without the medication." Dr. Chen's voice trailed off into the antiseptic air. I nodded, unable to speak, unable to think. The world had narrowed to a single point of impossible choice and inevitable loss. That night, I walked the city streets until dawn threatened the horizon. The neighborhood grew rougher with each block, the streetlights more scattered, the shadows deeper. I didn't care. What did I have to fear from the darkness when the light offered nothing but despair? I found myself in the old industrial district, where abandoned warehouses loomed like the corpses of giants, their broken windows like empty eye sockets staring at nothing. This was the part of the city people avoided, where rumors spoke of disappearances, of things that hunted in the dark. Good, I thought. Let something find me. Let it end. Such despair, a voice said from the shadows, smooth as silk and cold as winter wind. I can taste it in the air, thick and intoxicating. Tell me, human, what drives a young man to walk these streets with death in his eyes and nothing left to lose? I spun around, my heart suddenly racing. She stood in the doorway of an abandoned factory, and even in the dim light, she was impossibly beautiful. Tall and elegant, with pale skin that seemed to glow in the darkness, hair black as midnight falling in waves past her shoulders, and eyes that burned with a crimson light that should have terrified me. Should have. But I was beyond fear. "Who are you?" I asked. "I am Vivienne." She moved toward me with a fluid grace that was distinctly inhuman, her long coat sweeping behind her like wings. "And you are desperate. I can see it written in every line of your body, hear it in every beat of your racing heart. Someone you love is dying. Multiple someones, perhaps. How do you know that?" She smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "I have walked this earth for 3 centuries, child. I know the look of a man standing at a crossroads, weighing his soul against his heart's desire. A vampire. I should have run. Every survival instinct should have been screaming at me to flee. Instead, I stepped closer. Can you help them?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "My mother, my sister, they're dying. I need $305,000. And I need it in days. I'll do anything. Anything." Vivienne's eyes gleamed with interest. Such dangerous words, spoken so carelessly. "Do you even know what you offer?" "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "They're all I have. They're innocent. If there's a price to pay, let me pay it." Vivienne circled me slowly, studying me like a collector examining a rare specimen. "Interesting. Most humans who wander into my territory are either stupid, drunk, or suicidal. You seem to be none of these things, yet here you stand, offering yourself to a monster without even attempting to negotiate terms. What terms would matter? I asked bitterly. You're going to kill me anyway, aren't you? At least tell me you'll help them first. She laughed, a sound like crystal bells in the darkness. Kill you? Oh no, Marcus Sullivan. Yes, I know your name, I know everything about you. Killing you would be such a waste. No, I have a different proposition. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the inhuman perfection of her features, could feel the cold that radiated from her skin. I will give you the money you need, she said. I will ensure your mother receives her treatment and your sister gets her medication for as long as she needs it. I will guarantee their safety, their health, their future. And in return, you belong to me. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For 10 years, you serve me. You become my companion, my servant, my property. You live where I tell you to live, do what I tell you to do, be what I need you to be. Your life, your freedom, your choices, all mine. For 10 years, you are bound to me by a contract written in blood and sealed with magic older than your civilization. 10 years. A decade of my life, enslaved to a vampire. It should have been an impossible choice. And after 10 years? I asked. After 10 years, if you survive, you are free. I will release you from the contract with your life intact and enough money to start over. Your family will remain protected for as long as they live. That is my offer. Take it, or watch everyone you love die knowing you could have saved them. I thought of my mother's labored breathing, of Emma's small hand in mine as she asked me if she was going to die. I thought of futures stolen, of potential never realized, of love lost to biology and poverty and cruel, indifferent fate. I'll do it, I said. I'll sign your contract. Vivienne's smile widened, triumphant and terrible. Then let us make it official. She produced a piece of parchment from nowhere, ancient and covered in writing that seemed to writhe and shift in the darkness. The words were in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow I understood them. The terms were exactly as she had stated, 10 years of service in exchange for my family's salvation. Blood seals the contract, Vivienne said, extending one elegant finger. A claw emerged, sharp as any blade, and she drew it across her palm. Crimson blood, darker than human blood, welled up. Your blood and mine, bound together. Once this is done, there is no breaking it, no escape, no loopholes. You will be mine in every sense of the word. Do you understand? I understood that I had no choice, had never really had a choice from the moment Dr. Chan had spoken those horrible words. I understood that love was both the most beautiful and most terrible thing in the world, capable of creating miracles and demanding sacrifices that logic could never justify. I took the claw she offered and cut my own palm, barely feeling the pain. Our blood dripped onto the parchment together, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The words on the contract blazed with crimson light, and I felt something wrap around my heart like chains of ice and fire. The bond. The binding. The price of salvation. It is done, Vivienne said softly, and there was something almost like respect in her voice. You are mine now, Marcus Sullivan, and I am your eternity. The transformation from free man to servant happened faster than I could process. Within an hour of signing the contract, Vivienne had made a single phone call, and the hospital was calling me to say that an anonymous donor had paid for everything. My mother's treatment began immediately. Emma's medication was secured for the next 5 years, paid in advance. I cried then, standing in that abandoned warehouse while a vampire watched with ancient, knowing eyes. I cried for relief, for grief, for the death of the person I had been and the birth of whatever I was becoming. Come, Vivienne said, her voice almost gentle. I will show you your new home. She didn't live in a Gothic castle or a decrepit mansion as the stories suggested. Vivienne's home was a penthouse apartment in the most expensive building in the city, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture and artwork that belonged in museums. Money, I realized, was no object to someone who had been accumulating wealth for 3 centuries. The east bedroom is yours, she informed me, gesturing down a hallway lined with photographs. Some in color, some in black and white, some so old they looked like daguerreotypes. You will find everything you need has been provided. Clothing, toiletries, electronics. Your previous apartment has been vacated, your possessions retrieved and stored. Your employers have been notified that you will not be returning. Your phone has been upgraded and your new number shared with your family. I suggest you call them and explain that you've received a live-in position as a personal assistant to a wealthy benefactor. Which is, after all, the truth. I stared at her, overwhelmed by how quickly my entire existence had been reorganized. When did you? While you were crying, she said simply. I am very efficient, Marcus. It's how one survives for 300 years. Now, shall I explain your duties? The duties were strange but not as horrific as I had feared. I was to manage her household, handle her correspondence, screen her appointments. I was to be available at all times, day or night. I was to ask no questions about her business dealings or the nature of her visitors. I was to provide blood when required, no more than a pint at a time, no more than twice a month. I am not a savage, Vivienne said when she saw my expression. I do not drain my victims dry or leave a trail of corpses. I take what I need from those who serve me, and in return, I ensure they want for nothing. You will be compensated, fed better than you have eaten in years, and given access to amenities most humans only dream of. Many would consider it a fair trade. Except I have no choice, I said quietly. Her eyes flashed dangerously. You had a choice. You chose your family over your freedom. Do not insult both of us by pretending otherwise. She was right, and we both knew it. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally were two very different things. The first weeks were an education in how vampires lived. Vivienne was nocturnal, obviously, sleeping in a bedroom with blackout curtains so complete that no light could penetrate. She rose at sunset with the energy of a predator waking to hunt, and her nights were filled with activities that ranged from mundane to mysterious. She ran several legitimate businesses: real estate, investments, art dealing. She also had dealings I was not privy to, meetings with people who looked at me with hungry eyes and smiles too sharp to be human. Other vampires, I realized. I was in a world I had never known existed, a shadow society that moved through the human world like sharks through water. But it was the quiet moments that surprised me. Vivienne read constantly, devouring books in multiple languages. She played piano with the skill of a concertmaster, filling the penthouse with music that sounded like moonlight and memory. She painted sometimes, dark watercolors of landscapes that no longer existed, cities long since turned to dust. She was a monster. She was also, undeniably, a person. The cognitive dissonance was difficult to reconcile. You're staring, she said one night, not looking up from the canvas she was working on. A month had passed since the contract, and I had fallen into the strange rhythm of her household. I'm sorry, I said automatically. Don't apologize. I find your confusion amusing. You expected a monster, and instead you found someone who reads poetry and paints watercolors. It disturbs your neat categories. You do drink blood, I pointed out. And you eat meat, she countered. Animals are killed so you can survive. Is that so different? Animals aren't sentient. Neither are most of the criminals and predators I feed from, Vivienne said, finally looking at me. I told you I am not a savage, Marcus. I choose my prey carefully. The world is better for their absence. I didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't wrong exactly, but the casual way she discussed killing was chilling. You judge me, she observed, setting down her brush. That's fine. I expect nothing less from a human with a conscience. But understand this, I have lived 300 years by being very particular about who I am and what I do. I could be a monster. I have seen others of my kind who are. But I choose to be something else, something that can exist in the shadows without drowning in them. Can you say the same of your own kind? How many humans cause suffering without need, kill without reason, destroy beauty for profit or pleasure? Not all humans are like that. And not all vampires are mindless killers. Yet you assume all of us are monsters while taking it as given that humanity deserves more nuance. She stood, moving with that impossible grace to stand before me. You have 9 years and 11 months remaining on your contract, Marcus. I suggest you spend less time judging and more time learning. You might be surprised by what you discover. 3 months into the contract, something shifted. It started small. Vivienne began asking for my opinion on things: which painting to hang in the gallery, whether a business proposal seemed sound, what I thought of a particular restaurant. At first, I thought she was testing me, trying to catch me in some error. But gradually, I realized she genuinely valued my perspective. You see the world differently, she explained one night as we reviewed gallery contracts in her study. 300 years makes one jaded. You remind me that there is still wonder in small things. It's useful. Useful. Not pleasant. Not welcome. Useful. I told myself that's all it was, all it could ever be. I was property, a tool, a possession. The contract made that clear. But then there was the night I got sick. It was just the flu, nothing serious, but I woke up with a fever and chills, barely able to move. I forced myself out of bed, knowing Vivienne would be waking soon and expecting me to be ready. Instead, I found her standing in my doorway. "Get back in bed," she ordered, her voice sharp. "I'm fine," I lied, swaying on my feet. In an instant, she was beside me, one cool hand against my burning forehead. Her touch should have been unpleasant, but instead it was soothing, drawing away some of the heat. "You are ill," she stated. "Bed. Now. But your schedule can wait." She guided me back to bed with surprising gentleness, pulling the covers up. "I am 300 years old, Marcus. I think I can manage my own schedule for a few days. Rest." She brought me medicine, soup from a restaurant I loved, books to read. She checked on me throughout the day, which meant she was waking during daylight hours, something she had told me was uncomfortable for vampires. "Why are you doing this?" I asked on the second day, my fever-addled brain lowering its usual filters. Vivienne looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You belong to me," she said finally. "That means I have a responsibility to maintain what is mine. One does not neglect a valuable asset." Asset, right. That's all I was. But when she thought I was sleeping, I felt her hand brush the hair back from my forehead, her touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. And her voice, so quiet I almost missed it: "Fragile creatures, humans. So easy to break." There was something in her tone that wasn't quite clinical detachment. After I recovered, things continued to change in ways neither of us acknowledged. Vivienne started including me in more of her activities. Gallery openings where I stood at her side, learning to discuss art with people who had more money than sense. Business dinners where I provided a human perspective on mortal concerns. Even some of her meetings with other vampires, where I was presented as her companion rather than merely her servant. "Your human is well trained," one ancient vampire commented, looking at me like I was a particularly well-groomed dog. "Marcus is my partner," Vivienne corrected, and the emphasis on partner made the other vampire's eyebrows rise. "He manages my daylight concerns and provides valuable insight into the modern human world. I find his presence indispensable." The way she said it, looking directly at me, made something flutter in my chest that I knew was dangerous. 6 months in, we had our first real argument. A young woman appeared at the penthouse, terrified and desperate. Her name was Sarah, and she was fleeing an abusive ex-boyfriend who happened to be a vampire. She had heard rumors that Vivienne was powerful and sometimes helped humans in supernatural trouble. "Please," Sarah begged. "He'll kill me. He's already killed 2 of his other girlfriends. Everyone knows, but no one stops him because he's connected to some vampire lord or something. You're the only one who might." "No," Vivienne said flatly. "This is not my concern." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're just going to let her die?" "What I'm going to do is not involve myself in another vampire's territory dispute. This Dimitri is protected by Lord Constantine, who controls the entire Eastern Territory. Interfering would start a war. So one girl's life isn't worth the inconvenience?" Vivienne's eyes flashed dangerously. "Do not presume to judge me, human. You have no idea the delicate balance required to maintain peace in this city. One girl against hundreds of lives that would be lost in a vampire war. The mathematics are simple. The mathematics are that you're letting someone die because it's inconvenient. We stood facing each other, the air crackling with tension. Sarah looked between us, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do anything. I'll sign a contract like his, I'll serve you, just please don't let him kill me." Something in Vivienne's expression shifted. She looked at Sarah for a long moment, then at me, then sighed. "Damn it," she muttered. "Marcus, take her to the guest room. Sarah, you will stay here where you are protected by my territory claim. Dmitri cannot touch you within these walls without declaring war on me personally, which even Lord Constantine will not permit." "Thank you," Sarah sobbed. "Thank you so much." After Sarah was settled, Vivienne cornered me in the study. "You made me look weak," she said, her voice cold with fury. "I made you look human," I countered. "Or as close as you can get." "I am not human, Marcus. I am a vampire, and in our world, weakness is death. The only reason I'm still standing after 300 years is because other vampires fear me. If they think I've grown soft, they will test me, and people will die. Do you understand? I understand that you were going to let an innocent woman die to preserve your reputation." "Yes." She was genuinely angry now, her eyes blazing crimson. "Because that is the cost of surviving in this world. I have made harder choices than this, sacrificed more, done things that would give you nightmares. That is what 300 years requires. You have been here 6 months and think you understand anything about the choices I face. I understand that you've let this world make you into something that can rationalize letting people die." The words hung between us like a sword. I expected her to strike me, to use the contract to bind me silent, to do any of the terrible things she was capable of. Instead, she laughed bitterly. "You're right," she said, and the admission seemed to cost her. "I have let this world change me. I have made peace with compromises that once would have horrified me. Do you know why I painted that picture?" She gestured to the watercolor on the wall, a small village in sunlight. "That was my home. Before I was turned. Before I became this. I painted it so I would remember, but the truth is, I barely recognized the girl who lived there. She would be horrified by what I've become." For the first time, I saw something like vulnerability in her eyes. "But that girl would also be dead," Vivienne continued quietly. "Dead for 300 years, along with everyone she knew, everything she loved. I survived by making hard choices. By becoming something that could exist in the darkness. And yes, sometimes that means I forget that there are choices that matter more than survival." She looked away. "Sarah can stay. I'll deal with the political fallout. You were right to push me. Thank you." It was the first time she had ever thanked me for anything. After the incident with Sarah, something fundamental shifted between us. Vivienne still gave orders, still maintained the structure of our contract, but there was a softness in her interactions with me that hadn't been there before. She asked my opinion more frequently, involved me in decisions, even occasionally deferred to my judgment on certain matters. And I found myself looking forward to her company in ways that terrified me. It started innocently enough. Enjoying our conversations about literature and art. Appreciating the way her face would soften when she talked about her human life. Finding excuses to be in the same room with her even when my duties didn't require it. But then came the night I realized I was in serious trouble. We were in the gallery after closing, Vivienne examining a new piece for potential acquisition. It was a sculpture of 2 figures intertwined, the boundaries between them blurred until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. "It's about connection," I said, studying the piece. "How people can become so entangled with each other that they lose themselves. It's beautiful and tragic at the same time." "Yes," she agreed softly. "Beautiful and tragic. Like most connections that matter." She was standing close to me, close enough that I could feel the cold that radiated from her skin, Could see the way the gallery lights reflected in her eyes like distant stars. "Marcus," she said, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. "Uncertainty. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. The contract compels you to obey, but it cannot compel genuine feeling. So I'm asking, not ordering. Do you hate me?" The question caught me off guard. "What? No. Why would you think that?" "Because I bought your freedom. Because I bound you to me against your will, even if you technically agreed to the terms. Because you should hate me for what I've taken from you." I thought about my answer carefully. "I resented you at first," I admitted. "You represented everything I'd lost, every choice that had been taken from me. But that wasn't really about you. That was about a situation that had no good outcomes. You gave me the only option that saved my family." "That's rationalization," she said. "Not feeling." "Fine. You want to know how I feel." I turned to face her fully. "I find you fascinating. You're intelligent, cultured, funny when you want to be. You've lived 300 years and somehow maintained a sense of beauty and wonder despite everything you've seen and done. You're also terrifying, capable of violence I can barely comprehend, and sometimes your perspective on life and death is alien in ways that remind me you're not human." "And?" she prompted, her eyes locked on mine. "And I'm starting to care about you in ways that are incredibly stupid considering you literally own me and will only for another 9 years anyway." The words hung in the air between us. I'd said it. The truth I'd been trying to ignore for months. Vivienne stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she did something I never expected. She laughed, but it was a broken sound, almost like a sob. "Stupid," she agreed. "Impossibly, dangerously stupid. Because I find myself caring about you too, Marcus. And I am 300 years old. I have outlived everyone I ever cared about. I have watched lovers grow old and die while I remained unchanged. I swore I would never let myself feel this way about a human again. But," I asked, barely breathing, "but you challenge me. You make me remember what it was like to have principles, to care about things beyond survival. You look at me and see a person, not just a monster or a master. And I have been alone for so very long." She reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and touched my face with her cold hand. I didn't flinch. "This cannot happen," she said, even as she stepped closer. "The contract forbids intimacy between master and servant. It's a protection, to prevent coercion. I built that clause in specifically because I've seen too many vampires abuse their servants. If this continues, we violate the terms, and the contract becomes void." "Would that be so bad?" I asked. "I'd be free, and we could." "You'd be free, but your family's protection would end. The money would stop. The treatments would stop. Emma would die, Marcus. Your mother would die. That was the price of the contract. As long as you serve me, they are protected. If the contract breaks, so does my obligation." It was like ice water in my veins. Of course. The cost of freedom was their lives. "So we can't," I said, stepping back. "This can't happen." "No," she agreed, but she didn't move away. "It can't." We stood there, inches apart, both of us frozen by impossible choices. The sculpture watched us, two figures intertwined and inseparable, beautiful and tragic. "I should go," I said finally. "Yes," Vivienne whispered. "You should." But neither of us moved for a long time. Part 5. The Temptation. The next few months were exquisite torture. We both tried to maintain professional distance, to pretend that conversation in the gallery hadn't happened. We failed miserably. Small touches that lingered too long. Conversations that stretched into dawn despite both of us knowing we should stop. Moments of sitting together in comfortable silence that felt more intimate than words. "This is madness," Vivienne said one night as we sat on the penthouse balcony, looking out over the city. "I have lived 300 years by being disciplined, by controlling my impulses. And yet I cannot seem to stay away from you." "Same," I admitted. I try. I tell myself all the reasons this is insane. Doesn't help. The contract has 8 more years, she said quietly. 8 years of being this close without being able to. She trailed off, but we both knew what she meant. What happens after? I asked. After the 10 years are up and the contract ends. What then? Vivienne was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she finally said. I have never faced this situation before. Always, I have been careful to keep distance between myself and those who serve me. To never let it become personal. But you. I'm different, I offered with a slight smile. You're infuriating, she corrected, but there was warmth in her voice. You make me want things I gave up on centuries ago. Hope. Connection. The possibility that existence might be more than just survival. Is that so bad? It's terrifying. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the weight of centuries. I have watched everyone I ever cared about die, Marcus. Everyone. Lovers, friends, family. All dust. And I remain. When you are old and gray and dying, I will still look exactly as I do now. I will attend your funeral and continue existing in a world that no longer has you in it. Knowing that in advance, wanting you anyway, that is the definition of madness. Maybe, I said. Or maybe 8 years of something real is worth the cost. Maybe even 1 day would be. Spoken like someone who has never lived through centuries of grief. Spoken like someone who thinks grief is worse than never feeling anything at all. She smiled sadly. You have an answer for everything. Not everything. I don't have an answer for how we're supposed to do this. 8 more years of wanting something we can't have. It's going to break us. Then we must be very, very careful, Vivienne said. We walk the edge of the blade, never quite falling, never quite safe. It's all we have. But walking the edge of a blade means eventually you slip. It happened 8 months later, on a night that started innocently enough. Vivienne had been invited to a vampire gathering, a celebration of some kind that required formal dress and elaborate protocol. I accompanied her as her companion, playing the role of servant and assistant. The gathering was held in a mansion that made Vivienne's penthouse look modest, filled with vampires ranging from decades old to ancient beyond measure. I was one of only a handful of humans present, and the attention made my skin crawl. Stay close, Vivienne murmured. Some of those present are not as civilized as I am. The evening was tedious and tense, filled with political maneuvering and barely veiled threats disguised as pleasantries. I spent most of it at Vivienne's side, silent and observant. Then Lord Constantine arrived. He was ancient, powerful, and utterly terrifying. Where Vivienne had maintained her humanity, Constantine had clearly abandoned his long ago. He moved through the crowd like a shark, and his attention fixed on Vivienne with predatory interest. Vivienne, he greeted, his voice like honey over razors. I hear you've been making interesting choices lately. Harboring fugitives, interfering in territory disputes. Some might call that rebellion. Some might call it maintaining standards, Vivienne replied coolly. I seem to recall the old laws, Constantine. The ones about not brutalizing our food supply. The ones you apparently forgot. The old laws were written for a different time. His eyes slid to me. Is this the human who's made you so sentimental? Your little pet. My companion, Vivienne corrected, and there was steel in her voice. Who is under my protection? Of course. Constantine smiled, showing far too many teeth. Such loyalty to one's servants is admirable. Tell me, Vivienne, what exactly makes this particular human so special that you'd risk political complications for his sake? The question was a trap, and we both knew it. If she claimed I was nothing special, it would seem weak. If she admitted I mattered, it would give Constantine leverage. Marcus represents an investment in the future, she said carefully. The world is changing, Constantine. Technology, information, global connection. We need humans who can navigate that world on our behalf. Marcus provides that service. An investment, Constantine repeated, moving closer to me. Let me see this valuable asset. He reached out to grab my face, his intention clear, to humiliate, to demonstrate power, to put Vivienne in her place. I saw Vivienne tense, saw the calculation in her eyes. I also saw the split second where Constantine's attention wavered, distracted by another vampire's arrival. Without thinking, I ducked under his reach and stepped back, positioning myself slightly behind Vivienne in a way that was protective without being aggressive. It was a statement. I trusted her to protect me rather than submit to him. The room went quiet. Such a small gesture, but in the vampire world, small gestures carried enormous weight. Constantine's eyes narrowed. Bold, he said softly. For a human who should know his place. His place is with me, Vivienne said, and her voice carried power that made the windows rattle. As he has clearly demonstrated. Was there something else you wanted, Constantine, or are we done with this tedious posturing? For a moment, I thought we'd gone too far. Constantine looked ready to tear us both apart. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. Perhaps you're right about the changing world, Vivienne. This one has spirit. Don't let it get him killed. He walked away, and the gathering resumed its artificial pleasantries, but I could feel the eyes on us. We'd won a victory, but we'd also made ourselves visible in ways that were dangerous. We're leaving, Vivienne announced quietly. Now. We made our exit as gracefully as possible, maintaining the facade of unconcern while every instinct screamed at us to run. Only once we were in the car, speeding back toward the safety of her territory, did Vivienne let her composure crack. That was incredibly stupid, she said, but there was no real anger in her voice. You could have gotten us both killed. He was going to hurt me to humiliate you, I pointed out. Seemed wrong to let him. So instead you essentially declared yourself my partner rather than my servant in front of the most powerful vampire in the region. Do you have any idea what that implies? That you and I are more than the contract suggests? Exactly. She looked at me, and her expression was complicated. We've just painted a target on both our backs, Marcus. Other vampires will be watching now, looking for weakness, for ways to exploit any actual connection between us. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't think. No, you defended my honor and our partnership without hesitation. It was brave and foolish, and I. She stopped, seemed to struggle with words. I have not had anyone stand beside me like that in a very long time. Thank you. The way she looked at me in that moment, with genuine gratitude and something deeper, something that made my heart race despite every logical reason it shouldn't, that was when I knew we were in real trouble. We made it back to the penthouse in tense silence. Once inside, Vivienne paced like a caged animal, her usual grace replaced with agitation. This changes everything, she said. Constantine will be watching us now. Others will be watching. If they suspect that we actually care for each other, they'll use it against us. They'll threaten you to control me, or threaten your family to control you. Then we do what we've been doing, I said. We stay professional. We maintain distance. She laughed bitterly. Did tonight feel like distance to you? The way you stood with me, the way I defended you. We might as well have announced our feelings to the world. So what do you want to do? Send me away? Yes, she said immediately. Then, no. I don't know. Logically, you should leave. I should assign you to one of my properties elsewhere, keep you safe and distant. But the thought of you not being here. She trailed off, and I saw real anguish in her face. 8 more years, I said quietly. That's what we signed up for. 8 more years of this impossible situation. Or we end it now, Vivienne said suddenly. I could release you from the contract. Maintain the financial support for your family as a separate arrangement. You could be free, Marcus. You could have your life back. And we'd never see each other again, I finished. Because you know if I'm free and we're together, people will assume I'm under supernatural influence or coercion. They'll investigate, interfere. The only way this works is if I'm officially bound to you or officially nothing to you, Yes, she whispered. Those are the only options. We stood in her living room, the city lights casting shadows across her face, and I realized we'd reached a decision point. Stay bound and tormented by what we couldn't have, or separate and live with the absence of each other. I'm not leaving, I said firmly. The contract stays. We endure. Marcus. 8 years, I repeated. I can do 8 years. And after that, I'm free, your family is safe, and maybe we can figure out what comes next. You'll be older, she said softly. 8 years is nothing to me, but to you. I'll be 34. Still young enough to decide what I want to do with the rest of my life. Including, possibly, figuring out if there's a way for a human and a vampire to actually be together. There isn't, Vivienne said, but I heard the longing in her voice that contradicted her words. Every time it's been tried, it ends in tragedy. The human ages and dies, or they beg to be turned and lose everything that made them who they were, or the relationship itself destroys them both. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe no one's tried hard enough to make it work. Maybe no one cared enough. She moved toward me then, slow and deliberate, until we were standing close enough that I could feel the cold of her skin, could see the way her eyes reflected the city lights like stars in an eternal night. Do not make me hope, she whispered. Hope is the cruelest thing you could give me. Hope that 8 years from now, there might be a future. Hope that centuries of loneliness might actually end. It's too painful, Marcus. Please. I reached up and cupped her face, marveling at how her skin felt like marble under my hand, cold and perfect and utterly inhuman. Yet the way she leaned into my touch was entirely, painfully human. Too late, I said. We're both already hoping. We have been since that night in the gallery. Maybe even before that. The question is whether we're brave enough to see it through. Bravery, she said, and there were unshed tears in her eyes. A vampire crying, something I hadn't known was possible. Bravery is facing death in battle, standing against impossible odds. This is insanity. Maybe they're the same thing. For a moment, I thought she might kiss me. I thought I might close the distance myself. Contract be damned. But we both pulled back at the last second, both of us aware that crossing that line would destroy everything. 8 years, Vivienne said, stepping back. We have 8 years to figure out if this madness has any hope of working. And in the meantime, we must be more careful than ever. What happened tonight cannot happen again. We must be professional, distant, beyond reproach. Agreed, I said, even though my heart was screaming at the injustice of it. Good. Then go to bed, Marcus. We both need distance right now. I went, though it took all my willpower not to look back. 7 months later, everything fell apart. It started with Emma. My sister's condition, which had been stable for so long, suddenly worsened. The medication stopped being effective. She needed a new treatment, experimental and expensive and not covered by the original agreement. I called Vivienne immediately, even though it was midday and she would be sleeping. What is it? She answered, her voice thick with the unnatural sleep that claimed vampires during daylight. Emma. She's in the hospital. The treatment isn't working anymore. They need. I'll handle it, she interrupted. Whatever she needs, it's done. Let me make some calls. Thank you, I said, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. Marcus, her voice was soft, concerned. Are you all right? No, I admitted. I'm terrified. She's 7 years old and she's dying and there's nothing I can do. Then go to her. Be with her. Your duties here can wait. Family comes first. I spent the next 3 days at the hospital while doctors ran tests and started Emma on a new protocol. Vivienne arranged everything, the best specialists, private rooms, whatever was needed. She even broke her daytime sleep to make calls and use her influence. But on the 3rd day, as I sat beside Emma's bed watching her sleep, someone else walked into the room. Lord Constantine. Hello, Marcus, he said pleasantly, as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. I heard about your sister. Such a tragedy when children suffer. Every instinct screamed at me to get away from him, but I was trapped between him and Emma's bed. What do you want? I asked, keeping my voice level. To make you an offer. He moved closer, his presence filling the room like smoke. This new treatment your sister needs? It's very expensive. Very long-term. And while Vivienne is wealthy, these costs could go on for years. Decades, perhaps. She's handling it, I said firmly. Oh, I'm sure she'll try. But tell me, how long do you think Vivienne will maintain her commitment? 8 years was the original contract, yes? After that, you're free, and technically she has no obligation to continue supporting your family. The words hit like ice water. I'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that I hadn't thought about what happened after the contract ended. Would Vivienne continue to help Emma? Would she even be able to, if we were trying to maintain distance to avoid supernatural scrutiny? I see you understand the problem, Constantine continued. Here's my offer. Come work for me. I'll provide for your sister for as long as she lives. No conditions, no time limits. All I ask is that you leave Vivienne and enter my service instead. The contract, I started, can be transferred. I've already drawn up the paperwork. Vivienne would have to agree, of course, but I think she will. She cares about you, you see. She won't want to see your sister suffer because of a contract dispute. It was elegant and evil. Use my love for Emma to force me away from Vivienne, and use Vivienne's care for me to make her agree. Win-win for Constantine, who got both leverage over Vivienne and removed the human who'd been making her soft. No, I said. I won't do it. Not even for your sister? His eyes glittered with malice. How very selfish of you, Marcus. Choosing your own feelings over a child's life. I'm not choosing anything. Vivienne will continue to help Emma, contract or no contract. Will she? Are you truly that certain? Because I'm offering guarantees, legally binding, magically enforced. Can Vivienne offer the same after your contract ends? I wanted to say yes immediately. I wanted to believe that Vivienne would never abandon Emma. But doubt crept in, not doubt in Vivienne's character, but doubt in what would be politically possible if we were trying to maintain separation. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course. You have 3 days. After that, I'll assume you've chosen your own happiness over your sister's life. He left as silently as he'd arrived, and I was left staring at Emma's small, fragile form and wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. I didn't tell Vivienne about Constantine's visit immediately. I couldn't bear to see her face if she confirmed what I feared, that after the contract, she might not be able to help Emma without inviting dangerous scrutiny. But she knew something was wrong. 2 days later, she cornered me in the study. What happened? She demanded. You've been different since the hospital. Distant. Troubled. Tell me. So I did. I told her about Constantine's offer, about my fears, about the impossible choice I was facing. Vivienne listened in silence, her face growing colder with each word. When I finished, she stood perfectly still for a long moment. That manipulative bastard, she finally said, her voice deadly quiet. He's using your sister as a weapon against us both. Is he right? I asked. After the contract ends, will you be able to keep helping Emma without it causing problems? She looked away. I don't know, she admitted. If we maintain a relationship after your contract ends, others will question it. They'll investigate, possibly interfere. And if we don't maintain a relationship, then there's no reason for you to keep supporting my family, I finished. I would want to, she said fiercely. But Constantine is right that it would be complicated, especially if he's actively working against us. So what do I do? The words came out broken. How do I choose between Emma and you? You don't, Vivienne said firmly. Because this isn't actually a choice. Constantine is trying to manipulate you into doing something that benefits him. If you go to him, he'll use you against me, And eventually he'll find a way to break his promises to you. That's what he does. That's who he is. But Emma will be protected, Vivienne interrupted. Contract or no contract, for as long as I exist, your family will be safe. I'll put it in writing, magically binding, witnessed by neutral parties. Emma will have treatment for life. Your mother will be cared for. That's my promise to you, Marcus, and I don't make promises lightly. Why? I asked. Why would you do that? After the contract ends, I'm nothing to you officially. Why extend yourself? She moved closer, her eyes blazing with emotion. Because you are not nothing to me. Because these past 2 years, you've become more important to me than I ever wanted to admit. Because the thought of Constantine using your sister to take you away from me makes me want to burn his entire territory to ash. Is that clear enough for you? I'd never seen her so unguarded, so openly emotional. It was terrifying and beautiful and confirmed everything I'd hoped and feared. We can't, I said weakly. The contract. The contract has 6 years left. 6 years to figure out how to make this work without destroying each other. But we can't do that if you're with Constantine. Tell him no. Stay with me. Trust me to keep my promises. I do trust you, I said. That's the problem. I trust you so much that I'm terrified of what happens when you're not there anymore. Then trust me with this too. I'm not going anywhere. 300 years I've been alone. I'm done with that. Whatever it takes, however complicated it gets, we'll figure it out. Together, I asked. Together, she agreed. I told Constantine no. He wasn't happy about it, but with Vivienne's new promise legally documented and witnessed, he had no leverage. The crisis passed, Emma stabilized on her new treatment, and life returned to something approximating normal. But the incident changed something fundamental. We'd both acknowledged what we were to each other. We'd both committed to finding a way forward. Now we just had to survive the next 6 years without the waiting destroying us. Time is strange when you're counting down to freedom and simultaneously dreading what comes after. The months passed in a blur of mundane routine punctuated by moments of intense emotional connection that we couldn't act on. Vivienne became more involved in my life in ways that went beyond the contract. She attended Emma's school plays, sitting in the back of the auditorium and smiling at my sister's enthusiastic performance. She helped my mother find a better apartment, one closer to her doctor's. She remembered birthdays and holidays with thoughtful gifts that showed she actually listened when I talked about my family. And late at night, we'd sit together on the balcony and talk about everything and nothing. Her life before she was turned, a daughter of French nobility in the 1700s, married young to a man she barely knew, turned by a vampire who saw her at a ball and decided he had to have her. The decades of adjustment, learning to hunt without killing, developing enough wealth and influence to be independent. The lovers she'd taken over the centuries and lost to time, each one a lesson in why attachments were dangerous. After Jean-Paul died, she told me one night, 3 years into my contract, I swore I would never let myself care for a human again. He was 73, looked 90, and I looked exactly as I had when we met 40 years prior. Watching him deteriorate, watching him look at me with resentment because I would continue while he ended, it nearly broke me. But you still cared, I said. I did. Right up until the end. And after he died, I spent a decade being reckless, dangerous, everything I'd promised myself I wouldn't be. It took years to find balance again. Do you regret it? Loving him. She considered the question carefully. No. But I regret that there was no way for it to end well. With humans, there never is. Either you watch them age and die, or you turn them and watch them lose their humanity. Both options are tragedy. What about people who choose to be turned? I asked. Who want immortality? They think they do. But immortality changes you. You can't maintain human connections, human concerns. Everything becomes temporary, meaningless. The people who adapt best are those who were already somewhat sociopathic. Those who actually valued human connection. They suffer. Have you ever offered? I asked quietly. She looked at me sharply. Is that what you want? To be turned. I don't know. Maybe. I'm trying to figure out how this possibly works long-term. 6 years from now, I'm free. Let's say we actually try to be together. I age, you don't. Eventually I'm old and dying and you're still young and perfect. How do we build anything real with that hanging over us? We don't, Vivienne said bluntly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. This thing between us, whatever it is, has an expiration date. We can enjoy these years, savor what time we have, but ultimately it ends, I finished. You really believe that? I've lived it, Marcus. Multiple times. I know how this story ends. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you've just never found someone worth rewriting the ending for. She laughed bitterly. Arrogant to assume you're special. Is it? You said yourself I make you feel things you haven't felt in decades. You've rearranged your life to accommodate my family. You threatened war with Constantine to keep me. If I'm not special, you're doing a very convincing impression of someone who thinks I am. Fine, she admitted. You're special. That doesn't change biology and time. In 6 years, you're 32. In 16 years, you're 42. In 26 years, you're 52 and I still look 25. At some point, the age gap becomes absurd and uncomfortable. Then turn me, I said impulsively. No. Her response was immediate and absolute. I will not do that to you. I will not take your humanity, your warmth, your capacity for joy. I've seen what vampirism does to people, and I won't inflict that on you. So we just give up? Accept that this is impossible. I don't know. For the first time, I heard genuine desperation in her voice. I don't have answers, Marcus. I've been alive for 300 years, and I don't know how to make this work. All I know is that I care about you more than is wise, and in 3 years this contract ends, and after that, we figure it out, I said firmly. Together. However messy it gets. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably impossible. But I'm willing to try if you are. She looked at me for a long moment, her ancient eyes searching my face. You truly mean that? I do. Then we are both fools, she said softly. But she smiled when she said it. The last year of the contract was the hardest. We both knew it was ending, knew that we'd soon have to face the reality of what came next. The tension was almost unbearable. Vivienne threw herself into work, taking on more projects, spending more nights away on business. I knew it was her way of preparing for separation, building distance before the contract forced it. It hurt, but I understood. Then, 8 months before my freedom, everything changed again. There was an attack. A group of rogue vampires, new to the city and apparently unaware of or unconcerned with Vivienne's reputation, decided her territory looked like easy pickings. They hit one of her properties, killed 2 of her people, and sent a message: submit or be destroyed. Vivienne's response was swift and terrifying. I'd never seen her truly angry before, never witnessed what 300 years of accumulated power looked like when unleashed. She hunted them down in a single night, and by dawn, the rogue nest was destroyed and the survivors were fleeing the city. But one of them got close enough to Vivienne to strike. I watched in horror as a blade, silver, designed to hurt vampires, slashed across her throat. She killed her attacker instantly, but the damage was done. Vivienne collapsed in the aftermath, her skin turning gray, her breathing labored. Silver poisoning, combined with blood loss. Potentially fatal, even for a vampire. Get her home, one of her allied vampires commanded, and suddenly I was in a car racing toward the penthouse, Vivienne's head in my lap, her eyes unfocused. Marcus, she whispered. If I don't make it. Don't, I interrupted. Don't you dare. You're going to be fine. Listen to me. The contract, there's a clause. If I die, you're free immediately. Emma and your mother are still protected. I made sure of that. You'll be okay. I don't want to be okay without you, I said, and I realized I was crying. Don't leave me. Please. Not my choice, she said, and her voice was fading. Silver is, it's bad. Might not wake up. Need you to know. These years with you, best thing in centuries. Thank you. Vivienne. But she'd gone unconscious, and we were pulling up to the building, and then everything was chaos as her people rushed to help, bringing blood, calling specialists, doing everything that could be done. I wasn't allowed in the room where they worked on her. I paced the hallway outside, watched the sunrise through the windows, wondered if I was about to lose the most important person in my life right when we'd finally admitted what we meant to each other. It took 2 days. 2 days of waiting, of not knowing, of doctors shaking their heads and saying it was bad, really bad, she might not make it. 2 days of me realizing just how much my life had become intertwined with hers, how the thought of existing in a world without Vivienne in it was unbearable. When she finally woke up, weak and pale even for a vampire, the first word she said was my name. Here, I said, moving to her bedside. I'm here. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much and managed a small smile. Stubborn human. Should have run while you had the chance. Not a chance, I said. You're stuck with me. 8 more months, she said softly. And then you're free. About that, I said. I've been thinking. And I have a proposition for you. I don't want to be free, I said. Vivienne stared at me like I'd lost my mind. What? The contract. I don't want it to end. I want to extend it. Marcus, you've been counting down to freedom for 4 years. You've endured being bound to me because you had to. Now you're saying you want to stay. I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being imprisonment and started being home. You stopped being my master and became my partner. And I don't want that to end just because an arbitrary time limit says it should. It's not arbitrary, Vivienne argued, though I could see the hope warring with disbelief in her eyes. 10 years was designed to be long enough to be meaningful but short enough that you wouldn't lose your entire life to it. But what if I want to? I pressed. What if I've realized that my life with you is better than anything I'd build without you? You're young, she said. You don't know what you're giving up. A normal life, a human relationship, children, growing old with someone. I don't want normal if it means not being with you. And as for children, Emma's basically my child anyway. I've been more parent than brother to her since our mother got sick. That's not the same. Maybe not. But it's enough for me. Vivienne, when you were lying there possibly dying, I realized something. The idea of being free to live a life without you in it wasn't freedom at all. It was the worst prison I could imagine. She was silent for a long time, and I could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Hope and fear, desire and doubt, all warring for dominance. If we extend the contract, she finally said, it can't be indefinite. That's too close to slavery. But we could do another term. 5 years, maybe. Enough to see if this is really what you want or if it's just the intensity of the moment talking. 5 years, I agreed. And after that, if we're both still sure, we figure out something more permanent. More permanent how? She asked quietly. Marcus, I've been avoiding this conversation, but we need to have it. Eventually, you're going to want what I can't give you. You're going to resent that you're aging and I'm not. You're going to look at me and see all the years you've sacrificed. Or, I countered, I'm going to look at you and see the person I love, who's given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined, who saved my family and became part of it in the process. Vivienne, I know what you're afraid of. I've seen the paintings, heard the stories about the lovers you've lost. But I'm not them. And maybe, just maybe, I'm willing to face whatever comes as long as I face it with you. Even mortality, she asked. Even knowing that I'll watch you age and die while I remain unchanged? Even that. Though I have to ask, why is turning not an option? You've said you won't do it, but you've never really explained why. Vivienne was quiet for a long moment. Because I've seen what it does, she finally said. I've seen humans beg to be turned, convinced it's a gift, and then watched as they lost everything that made them who they were. The ability to feel sunlight, to enjoy food, to connect with other humans. They become hunters, predators, and the humanity they wanted to preserve is the first casualty. I won't do that to you. What if I'm willing to risk it? I'm not, she said firmly. I care about you too much to take that chance. If we do this, if we extend the contract and try to build something real, it has to be with you remaining human. That's my condition. Then we figure out how to make it work, I said. Yes, I'll age. Yes, eventually I'll die. But we'll have years together first. Decades, maybe, if I'm lucky. And you'll have someone who sees you, really sees you, not just the vampire but the person. Isn't that worth something? It's worth everything, she whispered. That's what terrifies me. You've become worth everything, and I don't know how to protect myself from the inevitable pain of losing you. You can't, I said gently. That's the price of caring. But trying to avoid pain by avoiding connection? That's not living. That's just existing. And I think you're tired of just existing. She laughed, and it was broken and beautiful. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher. One who's been figuring out how to be more than just a predator for 300 years. She taught me that sometimes the hardest choice and the right choice are the same thing. Vivienne reached out and took my hand, her cold skin against my warm flesh, and for the first time since the contract began, the touch didn't feel forbidden. It felt right. 5 more years, she said. We extend the contract for 5 years. And we use that time to figure out if this mad, impossible thing between us has any chance of working. Agreed. Agreed, I said. Though I should warn you, I'm fairly certain I already know the answer. Oh. It's working already. The only question is whether we're brave enough to see it through. She smiled, and it was radiant despite her weakness. Then I suppose we'd better be brave. The gallery opening was packed, as usual. Vivienne had become one of the most respected art dealers in the city, and her exhibitions were events. I moved through the crowd, greeting clients, answering questions, playing my role as her partner in every sense of the word. Marcus, Emma called out, and I turned to see my now 14-year-old sister bounding toward me, healthy and vibrant and alive. Mom wants to know if Vivienne can come to Sunday dinner again. She loved her last time. I'll ask, I promised, smiling at the impossibility of it all. My mother and Vivienne, chatting about recipes and neighborhood gossip like they were any two people who got along. The fact that one of them had been alive for over 3 centuries didn't seem to matter. The second contract had ended 2 years ago. We'd signed a third, this one for 10 years with an option to extend indefinitely. No one questioned it anymore. In vampire society, I was recognized as Vivienne's partner, not her servant. And in human society, I was simply a man who'd found success working for an eccentric but generous employer. We'd figured out how to make it work, not perfectly, never perfectly, but well enough. Yes, I was aging. At 33, I could see the first hints of lines around my eyes, the subtle changes that time brought. And yes, Vivienne looked exactly as she had that night in the warehouse 7 years ago. But somehow it didn't matter as much as we'd feared. Maybe because we filled our days with purpose, running the gallery, supporting my family, working with other vampires who were trying to find better ways to exist in the modern world. Maybe because we'd learned that love wasn't about fairness or equal circumstances, but about choosing each other despite the complications. You're thinking too loudly, Vivienne said, materializing at my side with a glass of wine. What's on your mind? Just thinking about how far we've come. 7 years ago, I was a desperate man making an impossible deal. And now? Now you're a man who chose to stay, she finished. Even when you didn't have to. Best decision I ever made, I said honestly. Even knowing how it ends? She asked quietly. It was a question she asked sometimes, in vulnerable moments, needing reassurance that I understood and accepted what I'd chosen. Even knowing how it ends, I confirmed. Though I have to say, for something that's supposedly doomed, we're doing pretty well. She laughed, and it was free and joyous in a way it hadn't been when we first met. We are, aren't we? Against all odds and conventional wisdom. Maybe that's the secret, I said. Maybe the only way to make impossible things work is to stop listening to everyone who says they're impossible and just do them anyway. Profound philosophy from my formerly desperate human servant. I prefer partner these days, thanks. Partner, she agreed, and the word held weight and meaning and promise. For however long we have. Which will never be long enough, I said. But I'll take what we can get. Later that night, after the gallery had closed and the crowds had dispersed, we stood on the penthouse balcony looking out over the city. The same balcony where we'd had so many conversations about whether this could work, whether we were brave enough, whether love was worth the inevitable pain. Do you regret it? I asked. Taking a chance on us? Vivienne considered the question seriously, as she always did. No, she finally said. It will hurt when you're gone. It will hurt more than anything has hurt in 300 years. But having you in my life, even temporarily, that's worth any amount of future pain. Good answer, I said, and she smiled. Though I reserve the right to be absolutely destroyed when the time comes. Fair warning. Fair warning accepted. Though for the record, I plan to stick around as long as humanly possible. Pun intended. Terrible pun. I should revoke your gallery privileges. You won't. You need someone to handle the daylight meetings. Practical to the end, she said, but her tone was affectionate. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, and I thought about the contract that had brought us together. 10 years for my family's salvation. It seemed like such a simple equation back then. Freedom for money, servitude for survival. I hadn't known that somewhere in those 10 years, in the space between master and servant, between vampire and human, between impossible and inevitable, we'd find something neither of us had been looking for. Partnership. Understanding. Love. It wasn't the love story I'd imagined when I was younger. There would be no growing old together, no lifetime of shared memories at equal pace. But there would be years of waking up and choosing each other despite the complications. Years of building something real in the space where it shouldn't exist. Years of proving that sometimes the most impossible things are the most worth doing. Thank you, I said softly. For what? For giving me a choice. For letting me choose this. Vivienne took my hand, threading her cold fingers through my warm ones. Thank you for choosing it. Thank you for being stubborn enough to stay even when I tried to push you away. Thank you for teaching me that 300 years of loneliness doesn't have to mean 300 more. Always so dramatic, I teased. I am French and immortal. Drama is expected. We stayed there until dawn threatened the horizon, until Vivienne had to retreat from the coming sun. As I watched her go, I felt the weight of the contract, not the magical binding, but the choice I'd made and continued to make every day. 10 years for salvation. But salvation, it turned out, worked both ways. I'd signed the contract to save my family. I stayed because somehow, in saving them, I'd saved her too. And maybe, just maybe, she'd save me right back.